Okay, the time has finally come for us to create a list view in order for our user to see the listings on the screen. Now, this is a fundamental topic in all of mobile app creation, and I'm seeing it more and more, this design pattern, on desktop as well. Obviously, it's also present on the web. So pay close attention, because all of the stuff I'm going to tell you in this particular section also applies to all of the above. Recall that in our search page, we want to load up a listings list page when our data comes through, and that doesn't exist yet. So inside of pages, let's add that particular page by going to add new wizard, and let's call it the name it expects, listings list page, and let's get creating. So the first thing we're going to do is change this type. It's not a page, it's a list page, which is very specifically different to a page because it contains a list. And it's a nice handy shortcut. We can create a list from scratch, but list page, generally in mobile development, you would show a list of items in a separate page. Having them on the same page as other menu elements isn't very good design. So that's why we have something like a list page rather than just a list that we put in a page. Okay, enough of my rambling. Let's change this ID to list page wrapper. This is going to hold, it's going to wrap our list page. We want to add in a couple of properties here. So let's have a var scroll position to know where we are in the scrolling, which of course is null because it doesn't exist at first. And then remember that we pass in a property called favorites, which is a bool. I forgot to add that. A boolean, true or false. And when you check for a bool equality, if it doesn't exist, if it's null, it comes back as false by default. So we don't have to set that as false. Now we can have a nav bar in this. So we can say, let's have a right bar item. And we can have an activity indicator bar item. And what are we going to have here and why? Well, we're going to have this spinning indicator to tell us when we're loading some more listings. So when we scroll to the bottom of our list of properties, we want to have a way of telling the user that we're getting more data from the internet. So that's why we have it in this page. Obviously, we can't see the previous one we made because that was in the search page and not on the listings page, which is where we are currently. So if we want to see this, we're going to correlate it to data model.loading. So when the data model is off doing its thing, then this indicator will be shown spinning. Okay, so what is a model? Well, this is the model that the list of items is going to use. And it's a special version of the model that's just come out on vPlay called a JSON list model. So you can pass in some JSON to this, or a JavaScript object, and it will make a source of data that gets pulled into the rows of the list. Okay, so I'll explain that more in a little bit, but for now let's give it an ID, list model. Let's tell it that we need it to have a source, right? So what's the source? Well, it depends on if we've decided we should have favorites or not. So we're going to query the favorites with a question mark. And if favorites is true, then we're going to pass in the data model.favorite listings. And we haven't touched favorites yet, but we're just setting up the scaffolding as we go. Otherwise, if that's not true, then we just want the data model.listings. And remember, in our data model, we have listings available here, but they're not exposed because they're still private, and we will expose them in due time. But those listings get updated when we get a success code and we can successfully add those listings. That's what concat is. Add those listings to the existing array. Okay, so back to the listings list page. What else do we need here? Well, we need some fields that are going to be shown inside each row of our list. So we can define those pretty easily. We can just call them and say, I want a text field. And then I want a detail text field. What else do we want? Well, we want some pictures of the property in question. And then a model, and I'll get into that in a sec. So those are the fields, right? What else do we need? So we've closed our brace, we've created the model for the list. So we need a title for the page, because obviously we want to show something. And this depends if we've selected favorites or not, so we're going to test that. And if we have selected favorites, or favorites is, favorites is true, then we're going to have favorites. Otherwise, we will have our translated string. You'll notice I'm back to translating strings again. We're going to have something else. What are we going to have? Well, we should show the number of listings out of the total number of listings, because remember, that's what the API reports. So you could go the old way of adding strings to each other in spaces. I'll show you a different way of doing that. And that's using the % symbol, which I've just, oh, there it is on the 5 of my keyboard, %1. So that's going to expect an argument, and %1 will be replaced by the first argument. So of %2 matches. Okay, and then obviously it's going to expect an argument, and the way you define it here is .arg. And so what are we going to pass in? Data model .num listings as the first argument, and then the second argument, which is data model dot, and what was it? Number of total listings. Okay, so that'll just say 10 of 100 matches. Okay, so that's the title of the page done. The other thing we should define is, what if we have no results? Well, we should communicate that to our user using an empty text.text, where we say, are there any favorites, or is favorites true or false rather? And of course, if favorites is true, then if there's no favorite listings, then let's tell the user no favorites chosen. And of course, if it is false, we're going to have something else. No listings available. So this is just in case we don't have any results and we want to tell the user specifically that's what it is. Because trust me, users will think your app is wrong and they're right. So you always have to tell them that they're the ones that have messed up. Okay. So what else do we need? Well, we're missing one crucial piece of this. And this is called the delegate. Now, what's a delegate? Well, it defines a view template, right? So it's not just a view. You know, if we said here app text, that would be a view. A page, that's a view. But a delegate says, hey, this is a template that I want you to use for the list model. So this list page automatically is going to find this delegated view template and apply it to each row of the list. Okay, so what kind of thing do we want to show? Well, let's just show a simple row. This is a default row that we can show our users that's included in pretty much any framework you find out there. Now, if you've used Angular before, this is the same as saying *ng4. You're just defining a template for something. Okay, so what does a simple row need? Well, it needs an item, which is going to grab from the list model at the current index. So if you've got row 0, row 1, row 2, it'll go and get that stuff from the list model, which is here. It'll pass over all of these fields. And then we also want to say, because this comes with an automatic image, do we want to auto size the image? And that's generally true. Otherwise it'll go off of, it'll be too big basically. We can give this an image maximum size if we so wish. So we can have device points of maybe 40, and you can mess around with that, feel free. And we also have to define how we fill the image. Image.fill mode. So the options you have for this, if you have capital I image dot, you can preserve, aspect crop, aspect fit, perhaps crop. So it'll cut off the bits of the image that don't fit the current aspect ratio. And we can see how that goes as we carry on with this. Right, so that creates the row that we're interested in. Now the row is the thing that you tap when you want to see more details. So we're going to tap in, funny joke, to the onSelected. Right, so when you tap it, we're going to say to our navigation stack, I would like you to pop all except the first and push. We've seen that before. And I want you to push a detail page, which we haven't created yet, but we will. And that detail page component, we're going to push a model item.model. Okay. And we'll cover that a little bit as we carry on with this. Okay, so what else do we need? Well, let's just recap that. We have a model, a JSON list model. We're defining what the model is, text, detail, text, image, model. We're saying what its source is, because every list needs a source of data. And so we're saying the source is, if we have favorites, go get the favorite listings from data model. If we don't have favorites, just get the plain listings from data model. And then that list goes off and creates a row for each entry that we have. Now, the reality is a little more complex than that, because rows take a lot of memory. So there's this whole recycling of rows. And if you want to know about that, just search. Maybe Android docs or iOS docs explain pretty well how row recycling works. For all intents and purposes, you don't have to worry about it, but it just ensures that you never run out of memory when you're using an infinitely scrolling list. Okay, so we've done our onSelected. Now, what else do we need? Well, what happens when we get to the bottom of this list? Well, list view dot footer, that's at the bottom. We need to define that. So let's have a visibility refresh handler. And as you guess, this is kind of like another spinning UI thing to tell us something's happening. Let's define if it's visible. So if favorites is false and the data model dot number of listings is less than data model dot number of total listings, okay, so basically it'll be visible if it's not favorites, because why would we need to refresh or add more data from the internet if we're looking at favorites, and the number of listings we've received is less than the total number available from the server. Okay, so this isn't quite the focus of this lecture, but I thought we'll just get this in there whilst we can. So we've got our visibility refresh handler. And so we also want to do something here called onRefresh. So we're going to subscribe into this method, or this event rather, and we're going to execute something. We're going to make our scroll position equal to the list view dot get scroll position. I don't know why that's not showing. And then what we need to do is logic dot load next page. I can't remember if we've done that yet. So basically all we're doing here is we're saying, hey, when you get to this footer, when we refresh, set the scroll position to the current scroll position, and then also go to the logic, fire off the signal that says load the next page. And then everything will bubble through for us as we need it to. Right, so I think that's pretty much it. This is going to be a horrible mess, but we're going to hit live anyway, because there's a whole bunch of things we need to add to this. So we're loading it up. Let's pop in London, hit go, bang. Right, so we have our new page. It's showing a list, and notice up at the top left corner of this page, we've got this back arrow. You get that by default when you use a method that has the word push on the navigation stack. So push means it'll show a back method. Android, it might or might not, depends if there's a hardware button that says back for Android. We've got undefined of undefined matches and no listings available. That's not a surprise because we've said to our item here, go get listings rather. And then we've also said, what do we want in the title? Go get the number of listings and the number of total listings, but we haven't exposed those yet. So the next lecture that we're going to go through is we're actually going to expose those because at the moment they're kind of hidden away. So we'll make something up in this public item that's accessible by that listings list page.